Can one outraged passenger throw an entire flight into chaos over a single seat? And what if the person she challenges is a decorated veteran with a special upgrade? Stay tuned, because this story takes a wild turn. I had just settled into my first-class seat, placing my headphones in my lap, when a shrill voice rang through the cabin. Someone was furious, demanding to know who had the audacity to sit in her seat. I looked up just in time to see a woman, let's call her Linda Monroe, storming down the aisle, her eyes locked onto me like a heat-seeking missile. She clutched her boarding pass, muttering about the incompetence of the airline staff. A hush fell over the nearby passengers. Everyone could sense ETA confrontation was brewing. My stomach twisted, knowing how messy these situations could get. A flight attendant, Sarah Green, approached with a polite smile, trying to de-escalate the tension, but Linda wasn't having it. She snapped, "I have a first-class ticket. I will not be cheated out of what I paid for." I stayed quiet, hoping it was just a misunderstanding, but she marched right up to my row, pointed directly at me and practically shrieked, "You're in my seat." Sarah remained professional, asking us both for our boarding passes. I handed mine over with a calm shrug, certain the mix-up would be cleared in seconds. Linda folded her arms, tapping her foot impatiently, acting as though this delay was the greatest injustice of her life. But when Sarah double-checked and confirmed that seat 2B was mine, Linda's expression darkened. Instead of apologizing, she exploded, insisting that there had to be a mistake. She declared that she always flew first class, that she deserved this seat, and that I didn't look like someone who belonged there. "You're too young and too healthy to need a premium seat," she snapped. Her voice rose higher, and soon every eye in the cabin was on us. Some passengers even pulled out their phones to record. Sarah, clearly uncomfortable, apologized for the confusion and kindly asked Linda to move to her assigned seat. But Linda planted her feet, arms crossed, refusing to budge. A murmur spread through the rows. Some passengers started whispering to each other, others openly telling her to sit down so we could take off on time. Linda turned on them too, snapping, "You have no idea what I've been through. I need extra leg room for medical reasons." Yet she offered no evidence beyond her own dramatic proclamation. Sensing a stalemate, Sarah quietly signaled to the lead flight attendant, James Holloway, who stepped forward and firmly stated that if Linda continued disrupting the flight, they might have to involve security. Linda lifted her chin defiantly and declared, "I'm calling Skyworld Airways corporate. I've never been treated so disrespectfully in my life." At that moment, the cockpit door opened and Captain Robert Hayes stepped out. He crossed his arms, surveying the situation with a stern gaze. "Ma'am, we need to depart on time. If you don't take your assigned seat immediately, we will have to escort you off the plane." Linda's eyes darted around the cabin as if looking for someone to take her side. But the only response was a collective sigh of frustration from passengers who just wanted to get in the air. My heart pounded. This was spiraling into a full-blown meltdown. But at the same time, I felt a twinge of guilt. I had a very specific reason for needing first-class own that wasn't immediately obvious. Sarah gave me a small nod, a silent encouragement to speak up. I took a breath and quietly told her, "I have a special status. The airline upgraded me for a medical reason." Her eyes flickered with understanding. She stepped away to speak with the pilot, leaving Linda still seething, ranting about how she wasn't moving. A charged silence filled the cabin. Some passengers continued filming. Others sighed, exhausted by the spectacle. Then Sarah picked up the intercom and cleared her throat. Skyworld Airways would like to take a moment to thank a special passenger on board today. This gentleman is a military veteran flying on a specially approved ticket for medical reasons. A stunned hush settled over the plane. Passengers turned to look at me with new understanding. Linda's jaw dropped mid-rant. Then a smattering of applause broke out. A few passengers murmured thanks for my service, and I felt my face heat up. I wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this. Linda sputtered, then scrambled to salvage her pride. I always support the troops," she stammered, but her voice wavered. The fight was gone. Captain Hayes reiterated one final time, "Ma'am, either take your assigned seat or you will be escorted off this flight." With all eyes on her, Linda had no choice. She huffed, grabbed her bag, and stomped down the aisle, mumbling something about never flying Skyworld Airways again. A ripple of relief spread through the cabin. She disappeared behind the curtain into economy class, and passengers finally exhaled. Sarah offered me a tight smile. "Sorry for the disturbance, sir." I nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and discomfort at having my military status announced so publicly. As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, passengers settled in, some leaning over to whisper words of appreciation. Others simply shook their heads at Linda's meltdown. I put on my headphones, my heart still pounding. But as the engines roared to life, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Linda might have been quiet for now, but something told me this wasn't over. As the flight continued, Linda Monroe sat stiffly in row 22, arms crossed, her gaze drilling into the back of Ethan Carter's head. Though the cabin had finally fallen into an uneasy silence, she wasn't done. Her fingers flew across her phone screen, composing a long, scathing email to Skyworld Airways' corporate office. She accused Ethan of falsifying his military status just to score a first-class upgrade, attaching a blurry photo she had secretly snapped during the earlier confrontation. She demanded that the airline launch a full investigation into this so-called fraud. Meanwhile, Ethan did his best to push the incident out of his mind, though a faint unease lingered in his chest. He wasn't naive. People, like Linda, didn't let things go easily. Still, he tried to focus on the present. A few passengers leaned over to offer quiet thanks for his service, their voices laced with genuine gratitude. It was a stark contrast to the simmering resentment radiating from the back of the plane. When the beverage cart rolled down the aisle, Linda barely acknowledged the flight attendant. Instead, she muttered under her breath about how the airline owed her an apology. The attendant, keeping her composure, simply gave a thin, professional smile before moving on. Linda clenched her phone, refreshing her email over and over, expecting an immediate response from corporate. But nothing came. She huffed, tapping the screen impatiently. Up ahead, the pilot's voice crackled through the speakers, announcing their imminent arrival. A collective wave of relief seemed to wash through the passengers, as if everyone had been quietly counting the minutes until they could escape the tension. As soon as the wheels touched down, Linda shot out of her seat, grabbing her bag with determination. She was going to get ahead of Ethan, find a manager, and demand justice before he could manipulate anyone else. Ignoring the flight attendant's gentle request to allow first-class passengers to deplane first, Linda barreled up the aisle, muttering under her breath. Ethan, still seated, exhaled. He knew. She wasn't done. A few minutes later, as he stepped off the plane, his heart pounded at the sight ahead. Standing near the arrival gate, two Skyworld Airways representatives scanned the incoming passengers, their expressions serious. And, beside them, Linda Monroe. Her arms were folded, her lips curled into a triumphant smirk. A few curious onlookers slowed their steps, sensing that this might be a sequel to the mid-flight meltdown. One of the airline reps, a tall man with a diplomatic but wary expression, gestured for Ethan to approach. "Mr. Carter, could we have a word?" Linda's voice cut in before he could answer. "Yes, please. Let's finally clear this up. This man scammed everyone on that plane. He's no veteran. The pilot's announcement? All based on a lie." Ethan's jaw tightened. He hated being put in this position. His service record wasn't something he liked flaunting. But he knew if he let Linda's accusations hang in the air, they could do real damage. One of the representatives, a woman named Megan Ellis, kept her voice measured. "Mr. Carter, we want to handle this discreetly. Do you have any documentation verifying your military service?" Linda crossed her arms tighter, her eyes gleaming as if she was certain she had won. A small crowd began to form. Passengers from first class, those who had witnessed everything, lingered near the gate, drawn in by the unfolding drama. Ethan swallowed hard, then reached into his side pocket. He pulled out a folded set of papers, his service record, and a letter from Skyworld Airways confirming his medically approved upgrade. Megan took the documents, her gaze scanning them carefully. Next to her, the second rep, David Holt, leaned in for a look. A moment of tense silence followed. Then Megan nodded in relief. She turned to Linda. "Ma'am, these documents are official. Mr. Carter's upgrade was legitimate." Linda sputtered, her confidence cracking. He looks too young to be a veteran. He's obviously faking this. People forge documents all the time." David sighed, rubbing his temple. "Ms. Monroe, unless you have any actual proof that Mr. Carter is lying, we have no reason to pursue this." The small crowd, which had been watching in silence, began to murmur. A few shook their heads, clearly fed up with Linda's antics. One older man dressed casually, but wearing a worn-out military cap, stepped forward. "I was in first class. I overheard him talking with the flight attendant about his deployment. He's the real deal." Linda's face drained of color, yet she refused to back down. "I already sent an email to corporate. They'll launch a full investigation." Megan and David exchanged a glance. "We saw your email, Ms. Monroe," Megan said calmly. "At this time, we have no reason to take further action." Linda's fingers twitched around her phone. "This is ridiculous. I'll sue this airline for enabling a fraud." David's expression hardened. "Ms. Monroe, if you continue harassing Mr. Carter, we may have to consider banning you from future Skyworld Airways flights." A few scattered claps broke out in the crowd. Linda froze, realizing that the support she had expected was nowhere to be found. Passengers who had once been passive observers now openly sided with Ethan. Her voice wavered. "This isn't over." Megan sighed. "For your sake, ma'am, I suggest you let it be." Ethan stayed silent, his fists clenched at his sides. He didn't want to escalate things further, but the damage was already done. Linda had publicly tried to discredit his service. That fact wouldn't disappear overnight. As the crowd began dispersing, Linda stood frozen, her mind racing for her next move. Ethan knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the last he'd hear from her. As Ethan Carter turned to leave the confrontation at the gate, he shook his head at the airline representative's offer to file a complaint against Linda Monroe. "I just want to move on," he said. But fate had other plans. Just then, a senior pilot passed by, glancing at Ethan before offering a respectful nod and a quick salute. "Thank you for your service, sir." Ethan nodded in return. But the damage to Linda was instant and irreparable. Her last hope that she could convince someone Ethan was lying shattered in real time. A few bystanders chuckled, shaking their heads as if watching the final act of a tragic play. The airline reps turned back to Linda, their patience long gone. "Ms. Monroe, step aside. This matter is closed." She trembled, her phone clutched tightly, whispering, "This isn't over. I'll take this to social media." Ethan exhaled wearily, choosing to ignore her as she threw a few last-minute barbs about exposing the truth. The crowd dispersed, some offering Ethan quiet support, others shaking their heads at how entitlement had morphed into a full-blown conspiracy theory. Linda, however, had one last humiliation for the day. Determined to get her side of the story out first, she pulled out her phone to record a dramatic exposé, ranting about how Skyworld Airways was covering up fraud. But karma had other plans. Her phone screen flickered, then black, battery dead. For the first time since stepping onto the plane, Linda Monroe was completely silent. The digital war begins. Though Ethan was relieved the ordeal hadn't escalated further, he knew one thing. Linda wasn't the type to let things go, and sure enough, she didn't. While the plane was still mid-flight, Linda had already sent emails to corporate, doubling down on her fraud accusations. Upon landing, Skyworld Airways reviewed her claims, only to find Ethan's records completely legitimate. Humiliated, Linda retreated from the face-to-face confrontation. But that didn't mean she was done. Instead of fighting the airline directly, she pivoted to something worse: the internet. Linda stormed through baggage claim, phone glued to her hand, her thumbs furiously tapping out accusations. Her new story? Ethan wasn't just a fraud, he was a con artist who had tricked an airline, exploited military sympathy, and robbed a paying customer of first class. By the time Ethan made it to his rideshare, the first few versions of her story had already hit local Facebook groups and low-tier gossip blogs. She uploaded a shaky, close-up video of herself, eyes red with fury, recording from the airport curb. They're covering up a massive scandal. This airline lied to protect a fake veteran, and they let him get away with it. Ethan tried to block it all out. He got in the car, watching as Linda trailed behind him at a distance, phone in hand, filming him as if he were some criminal she was exposing. He knew then this wasn't over. From rumors to national attention. By the time Ethan arrived home, his phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, texts with links. Linda's video had spread faster than wildfire, getting shared in veteran forums, local news discussion groups, and conspiracy pages. Some people mocked her, calling it a desperate attempt for attention. Others, they weren't so sure. Linda, emboldened by the initial traction, doubled down. She posted video after video, each one more dramatic than the last, claiming she had inside sources confirming Ethan had never served. Her supporters, a mix of entitled passengers, airline complainers, and internet trolls, began repeating the same demand. Expose the fraud. Skyworld Airways attempted to shut down the speculation, issuing a brief statement confirming that Ethan's credentials were fully verified. But it wasn't enough. Instead of dying out, the scandal evolved. Now, local news stations picked it up some, framing it as passenger versus veteran, the great first-class debate. Reporters started digging, trying to track down passengers from the flight, hoping for an exclusive scoop. Exhausted, Ethan declined every interview request. Linda? She jumped at the chance. In an exclusive interview, she spun an elaborate tale about airline corruption, military fraud, and how the real victims were honest travelers like her. Then she announced her biggest move yet, a live public expose. She booked a community hall and invited anyone who had ever felt cheated by fake heroes. Ethan felt his stomach twist. This wasn't just an online argument anymore. Linda was trying to turn an internet conspiracy into a public trial. Skyworld Airways, now sensing a PR nightmare, reached out again. "Do you want us to release a stronger statement?" But Ethan hesitated. Would that help? Or just add fuel to Linda's fire? The public trial. Meanwhile, Linda went all in. She printed flyers, pasting them on lampposts and coffee shop bulletin boards, her own money funding this obsessive smear campaign. The title? Fake Veteran Exposed, the Truth Revealed. Underneath, a blurred-out photo of Ethan, as if he were some dangerous criminal. People took pictures of the flyers, posting them online. Some people laughed at Linda's desperation. Others, they weren't so sure anymore. Ethan's closest friends urged him to stand his ground. "This is insane. She's already lost. Let her embarrass herself." But Ethan wasn't so sure, because in a world where lies spread faster than the truth, he knew one thing. Perception was everything. And now, Linda had turned his entire life into a spectacle. Days ticked by. The hype around Linda's event grew. Her die-hard supporters, fueled by outrage and self-righteousness, were ready for battle. Linda teased damning evidence, claiming it would end the debate once and for all. Ethan had a choice: ignore it and hope it fizzled out, or walk into that hall and finally shut it down. Ethan Carter's phone buzzed constantly. Voicemails from reporters, emails from news outlets, and a flood of social media notifications filled his screen. Everyone wanted a statement. He ignored them all. Instead, he focused on gathering every document that could verify his service. His discharge papers, commendation letters, and medical records in case this circus turned into a public trial. Meanwhile, Linda Monroe was thriving in the chaos she had created. On her social media, she announced a shocking reveal about Ethan's real identity. Her followers erupted, bombarding Ethan's accounts with insults, threats, and mocking memes. Some called him a fraud. Others ridiculed him with photoshopped images. But not everyone bought into Linda's lies. Some onlookers defended Ethan, calling Linda a bully desperate for attention. Still, the damage was done. One evening, Ethan noticed a small group of Linda's supporters gathered near his street, standing in the dark with phones out, filming. They weren't yelling or trespassing, but their intent was clear. They were hoping to catch him slipping, to get any footage that could be twisted against him. Ethan called the local police, who responded swiftly, reminding the group that harassment and trespassing wouldn't be tolerated. They dispersed, but not before one of them sneered, "See you at Linda's event." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't just an online attack anymore. This was real, and it was escalating. Linda's event gains traction. The airline, growing concerned, offered Ethan legal support if he wanted to press defamation charges. But he hesitated. Did he really want to drag this into court? Social media buzzed with rumors that local veterans offended by Linda's smear campaign might show up to her event to call her out publicly. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the anxiety. Would attending validate her claims? Would it just turn into a bigger spectacle? As the days passed, Linda's publicity stunt grew bigger. Local news stations announced they would cover the event live. Ethan spent hours sorting through old documents, ensuring he had everything necessary to prove his military record beyond a doubt. If this was going to end, it had to end publicly. The night before Linda's event, Ethan barely slept. His mind raced with scenarios show it could go horribly wrong or finally put the rumors to rest. One thing was certain: the moment of truth had arrived. The Truth Unveiled event. Linda had rented out a local community hall for her big moment. She plastered flyers all over town, featuring a blurred-out photo of Ethan with the words "Fake Veteran" exposed in bold red letters. The reaction was mixed. Some people rolled their eyes, dismissing it as a desperate attention grab, but others, driven by curiosity or a sense of duty, considered showing up. Ethan debated staying far away. Why dignify this with his presence? But a close friend reminded him, if you let her lies go uncontested, people will believe them. So he made his choice. He packed his service records, photos, and letters, tucked them into a discreet folder, and prepared for the final confrontation. Word spread that a group of veterans would be attending, some wearing hats and jackets hinting at their service. The day arrived under an overcast sky. The community hall parking lot filled quickly, people shuffling inside unsure if they were about to witness a real exposé or a total farce. Inside, Linda was in full showman mode. Dressed in business casual, she bustled around the small stage, her phone live streaming to her online audience. Her followers cheered her on, typing, "Expose the fraud. This is bigger than one seat. This is about justice. Linda for president." A joke, but she took it seriously. A projector and laptop sat on the stage, presumably to show her so-called evidence. A few supporters handed out flyers summarizing her version of events, show she was the real victim, how Ethan tricked everyone, how the airline was covering up the scandal. Then Ethan walked in. The moment of truth. Linda's eyes lit up with manic excitement. Her prey had stepped into the trap. She beckoned him to the front, her voice dripping with triumph. "Ladies and gentlemen, the fraudster himself has arrived." A hush fell over the crowd. Rows of folding chairs were nearly fulsome people filming on their phones, others just leaning forward expectantly. Linda launched into her speech, her voice dramatic and theatrical. She recounted the airplane fiasco, painting herself as a helpless victim who had simply wanted fairness. She accused Ethan of stealing her seat by faking a sob story about military service. Then she fired up her projector, displaying blurry screenshots, airline emails taken out of context, and out-of-focus images from the plane. None of it was real proof. But Linda didn't care. She reached the final slide, a screenshot of a public registry of veterans. She pointed triumphantly. "There you have it. His name isn't even on the list." The audience stirred, murmuring amongst themselves. Then a man in the front row slowly stood up, a man in a Vietnam veteran cap. He cleared his throat. "Did you check the Department of Defense records? Or did you just Google this?" Linda's smirk faltered. She stammered, Did my research." The veteran rolled his eyes. "Google doesn't hold full military records. You know that, right?" A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the crowd. Linda's face reddened, but she still had one more card to play. She turned to Ethan. "Fine. If you're so innocent, prove it. Show us your papers right now." The entire room turned to Ethan. This was it. He stepped forward, pulled out his folder, and, one by one, laid out his documents on the podium. His discharge papers, a letter of commendation from his unit, a doctor's note explaining his medical condition from deployment. The room fell into stunned silence. A few heads nodded respectfully. A low murmur of approval swept through the crowd. Linda's mouth dropped open. She sputtered. This could all be fake. People forged documents. But the Vietnam veteran stepped closer, studying the official stamps. He turned to the crowd. Looks real to me. And then applause. A slow build at first, then louder. Linda stood frozen, her moment of victory crumbling around her. She tried to salvage it, but even some of her supporters whispered amongst themselves. She had lost, and she knew it. But she wasn't done yet, because as she stormed off the stage, she muttered, "I'll take this to the media." Ethan exhaled, feeling exhausted but victorious. The truth was out. But was this really over? Somehow, he doubted it. The moment Ethan Carter presented his official discharge papers, commendation letter, and medical documentation, the entire hall fell silent. All eyes were on him. Some people watched with skepticism, waiting for Linda to poke holes in his proof. Others, especially those who had military experience, already knew the truth. Linda stared in disbelief, her mouth slightly open. She had expected Ethan to run from the confrontation, to be exposed as a fraud. Instead, he had calmly laid out undeniable proof. A man in the front row, a Vietnam veteran, stepped forward. He picked up one of the documents, his fingers tracing the official stamps. After a few moments, he nodded and turned to the audience. "This is real." A wave of applause swept through the hall. Linda's face turned red. She tried to recover, grasping at anything to salvage her narrative. "This doesn't change the fact that the airline scammed me," she shouted. "They should have upgraded me instead." But the moment had passed. Even her few remaining supporters shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered among themselves, realizing that Linda had gone too far. A couple of veterans in the audience stepped forward, their expressions firm. One of them, a man in his 60s, held up his own military documentation. "Ma'am, you have no idea what you're talking about. Real service records aren't always easy to find publicly. You just didn't do your homework." Linda's jaw clenched. She had lost the crowd. Still, she refused to go down quietly. With one final act of defiance, she whipped out her phone, spinning in a circle, filming the audience. "Look at them, all brainwashed. This is a setup. They planted fake documents just to shut me up." A few people laughed outright. Others simply shook their heads, done with her antics. Ethan exhaled, exhausted. As people approached him, thanking him for his service, a local reporter stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Mr. Carter, do you have any comment on tonight's events?" Ethan glanced at the camera but shook his head. "No statement. I just want to move on." Meanwhile, Linda stormed off the stage, pushing past people as she escaped through a side exit, her phone still recording. Outside, she live-streamed to her dwindling audience, ranting about conspiracies, claiming that Ethan's documents were forged, that the entire event had been staged to silence her. But back inside the hall, the reaction was clear. People rolled their eyes. Some laughed at how badly Linda's exposé had collapsed, and a few neighbors who had once believed her accusations approached Ethan, apologizing for getting swept up in her hysteria. Ethan accepted their apologies with a tired smile. The truth had finally been laid bare. But was this really over? He doubted it, because Linda Monroe wasn't the type to accept defeat. Linda slunk home, humiliated. But as she paced her small apartment, her mind raced. She refused to let this be the end. She had been publicly embarrassed, her reputation torn apart. There had to be a way to turn things around. Then she got an idea. She grabbed her phone and typed out an email. The recipient, a notorious online tabloid, one known for clickbait headlines and conspiracy theories. Her subject line? Exclusive. The fake soldier scamming airlines for first-class seats. She didn't have real evidence, but she knew what people wanted to hear. Within minutes, the tabloid's editor responded. They were interested. Very interested. As Ethan tried to recover from the public spectacle, his phone buzzed again. A friend had sent him a screenshot of a cryptic teaser from a tabloid news site. The headline? Coming soon. The first-class hoax insider speaks out on airline corruption. Ethan felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He knew exactly who was behind it. Linda wasn't giving up. She was taking her smear campaign to the press. And this time, she had the perfect platform to spread her lies even further. The moment Ethan Carter saw the screenshot his friend had sent, a familiar sense of dread settled over him. A teaser tweet from a tabloid site, the kind known for blowing small scandals into national drama, promised a shocking insider expose on airline fraud. The attached silhouette was vague, but Ethan knew exactly who it was meant to represent. His stomach twisted. He had hoped that after the community hall disaster, Linda Monroe would finally let this go. But she had other plans. Instead of accepting defeat, she was escalating, taking her false accusations to a national level. Ethan faced a difficult choice. Did he ignore the tabloid article and hope it fizzled out? Or did he lawyer up and prepare for a legal battle? Some of his friends urged him to sue immediately, arguing that letting the lies spread unchecked would only make things worse. But Ethan hesitated. A public lawsuit could feed into Linda's victim narrative, turning her from an unhinged conspiracy theorist into a wronged whistleblower. And that was the last thing he wanted. For the next several days, the tabloid did what tabloids do best. They teased the story relentlessly without actually publishing anything. You won't believe how one man fooled an entire airline. Coming soon. The shocking truth they don't want you to know. Wait until you see how deep this deception goes. Online trolls latched onto the drama, flooding comment sections with speculation. Some repeated Linda's lies. Others mocked her, pointing out how she had failed spectacularly at the community hall. Meanwhile, Ethan did his best to stay offline, trying to focus on his day-to-day life. But that didn't stop the messages. Friends, co-workers, even old acquaintances started sending him screenshots, asking if he had seen the rumors. Even Skyworld Airways' PR team reached out, offering to issue a public statement to reaffirm that Ethan's military credentials had been verified. But Ethan declined. He had learned something from the social media storm. The more fuel you add, the longer the fire burns. And then Linda made things worse for herself. Convinced that she was about to go viral, Linda boasted nonstop on social media. She claimed she had rock-solid evidence that would shock the nation. A neighbor even overheard her bragging that once the tabloid piece dropped, she would finally get the justice she deserved. But reality wasn't on her side. The tabloid set a release date for the following Monday morning, hyping up the article like it was the scoop of the century. Linda, unable to contain herself, started a countdown clock on her social media page. She posted daily updates, one more day until the truth comes out. I'm finally getting the last laugh. They can't cover this up forever. She poured everything into this moment, believing that the article would vindicate her. But there was one problem. Ethan wasn't sitting back anymore. The night before the tabloid article was set to go live, Ethan's lawyer sent a formal cease and desist letter to the editor-in-chief of the publication. It was firm and clear. If they published demonstrable falsehoods, they would be held legally responsible for defamation. Monday morning arrived. Linda sat by her phone, refreshing the tabloid's page over and over. But instead of an explosive tell-all, something strange happened. The article was delayed. Hours passed. Linda grew furious, spamming the reporter's inbox, demanding to know why the piece hadn't gone live. And then, finally, the article dropped. But it wasn't what she expected. When the big expose finally went live, it was disappointing. Instead of a hard-hitting takedown, it was a vague, meandering article that simply rehashed Linda's original accusations without offering any new evidence. The reporter had clearly walked back most of Linda's wildest claims, likely spooked by Ethan's legal warning. Readers weren't impressed. The comment section turned against Linda instantly. So, where's the proof? This is just the same nonsense she was screaming about last week. I was hoping for a real scandal, not some lady's weird vendetta. Instead of vindicating Linda, the article cemented her as a joke. But Linda refused to accept reality. She lashed out online, accusing the tabloid of watering down the truth to avoid legal trouble. She urged her followers to read between the lines, insisting that the real evidence was being suppressed. But people had moved on. Bigger news stories pushed Linda's failed crusade into obscurity. For the first time in weeks, Ethan could finally breathe. It seemed like the worst was over. But Linda wasn't done yet. Because if the media wouldn't take her side, she would take Ethan to court herself. Humiliated by her failed smear campaign, Linda sat in her living room, stewing in resentment. No matter what she did, people weren't taking her seriously. So she turned to one last, desperate move, a lawsuit. That evening, she filled out the paperwork for small claims court, accusing Ethan of emotional distress, defamation, loss of a first-class upgrade. She claimed she had proof that she had booked a first-class ticket, conveniently ignoring the fact that Skyworld Airways had already confirmed otherwise. Linda convinced herself that if no one else would hold Ethan accountable, the legal system would. Ethan, meanwhile, had no idea that soon he'd be facing her in court. Ethan Carter first learned about the lawsuit in the most ridiculous way possible through a social media post. A friend sent him a screenshot of Linda Monroe's latest rant, where she gleefully announced, "See you in court, liar. I won't let this go." Ethan rolled his eyes. At first, he hoped it was just an empty threat, another desperate attempt to cling to relevance. But just a few days later, a process server knocked on his door, handing him an official summons. Stunned, Ethan flipped through the pages. Linda was suing him. The claims? She had suffered emotional distress. He had stolen her first-class seat. He had defamed her by allowing the airline to expose her tantrum. She even demanded financial compensation, claiming she had lost her upgrade and suffered public humiliation. Ethan felt a mix of anger and disbelief. This was insane. He immediately called his lawyer, who, after reading the lawsuit, let out a low chuckle of disbelief. "This is one of the weakest cases I've ever seen," his lawyer admitted. "But don't underestimate her ability to turn this into a spectacle." Ethan sighed. It seemed Linda Monroe was determined to drag this out as long as possible. Word of the lawsuit spread quickly. Some of Ethan's neighbors, who had already witnessed Linda's previous meltdowns, expressed their eagerness to watch it unfold. When the court date arrived, it was held in a small gray county courthouse, the kind where minor disputes like landlord-tenant issues or parking violations were handled daily. Nothing high profile. But to Linda, this was her moment in the spotlight. Ethan arrived in a modest suit, prepared with all necessary documents. Meanwhile, Linda strutted in like a reality TV star, wearing a bright, attention-grabbing blazer, phone in hand, whispering updates to her online followers. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with years of experience, called them forward and scanned the case file with a faint frown. Linda launched into her speech immediately, her voice full of practiced indignation. She dramatically recounted the airplane fiasco, insisting she had been deceived by a fake soldier who had stolen her rightful upgrade. Then, with a flourish, she held up a printed copy of an airline seating chart, claiming Ethan had somehow bribed the airline staff to take her spot. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Monroe, do you have actual proof that you were assigned a first-class seat?" Linda smugly produced a booking confirmation. But there was one major problem. It clearly stated she had booked an economy seat. The judge sighed, her patience already wearing thin. "This document confirms you were assigned economy class. If your ticket was changed last minute, do you have proof?" Linda hesitated, then bluffed. "The airline changed it behind my back." Ethan's lawyer remained calm, placing an official airline seating log on the judge's desk. "Your Honor, this is Skyworld Airways' official seating record. It confirms that Ms. Monroe was never booked in first class. Additionally, we have witness statements from flight attendants verifying that she was assigned economy." The judge studied the document. A brief silence followed. Then she turned to Linda. "So, let me get this straight. You're claiming that an airline secretly downgraded you in a conspiracy so they could upgrade this specific passenger instead?" Linda's confidence cracked. She opened her mouth, trying to spin another lie, but the judge had already moved on. "And regarding your defamation claim, did Mr. Carter personally make any public statements about you?" Linda stammered. No, but he let the airline announce his military status." "He embarrassed me." The judge blinked. "You're arguing that the flight crew's decision to announce his service, something that had nothing to do with him, amounts to defamation?" Linda shifted uncomfortably. "He orchestrated it," she blurted. "Do you have proof?" the judge asked. Another long silence. Then the judge turned to Ethan. "Mr. Carter, do you have documentation verifying your military service?" Without hesitation, Ethan handed over the same official records he had shown at the community hall. The judge skimmed through them, checking the official seals and signatures. Then she looked up. "This is valid." A few muffled snickers came from the small audience. Linda's face burned red. Realizing she was losing, she tried one last desperate move. "Your Honor, he could have forged those documents. We need a full investigation." The judge sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Ms. Monroe, accusations like that require evidence. Do you have any?" Linda's jaw clenched. She had nothing. Seeing where this was going, Ethan's lawyer made the final move. "Your Honor, we motion to dismiss this case entirely on the grounds of lack of merit." Linda's head snapped up. "This court is biased. I'll take this to a higher court. This isn't over." But the judge had heard enough. She slammed the gavel, case dismissed. No damages awarded. Ethan exhaled in relief. The case was over. As he left the courtroom, a few bystanders, some who had witnessed Linda's previous antics, gave him quiet thumbs-ups. Meanwhile, Linda stormed out, camera rolling, ranting about how the system was rigged against her. She live-streamed her walk of shame, calling it a travesty of justice. But few people were listening anymore. Even some of her most loyal followers had begun to lose patience. Ethan, walking to his car, felt a sense of peace for the first time in weeks. He hoped this was the last he'd hear of her, but that was wishful thinking, because Linda Monroe wasn't done. The lawsuit had failed. The public smear campaign had backfired. But instead of accepting defeat, Linda's obsession took a darker turn. Over the next few days, neighbors started noticing her lurking around Ethan's house. She was seen snapping pictures of his property, scribbling notes on a pad, and watching his every move. One morning, Ethan woke up to find a note pinned to his mailbox. It read, "Stop lying about your service. We know the truth." The handwriting was sloppy and rushed, but Ethan had no doubt who was behind it. Then, the final straw. His employer called him into the office. Someone had contacted HR, accusing him of falsifying his military record to get preferential hiring. Though his employer knew it was nonsense, the call had wasted everyone's time. And when he checked Linda's latest posts, she had written, "The truth always comes out." Ethan had enough. It was time to stop playing defense, and this time he would make sure Linda could never harass him again. Ethan Carter knew Linda Monroe wasn't finished. The lawsuit had failed. The community hall disaster had made her a laughingstock. But instead of backing off, she doubled down. This wasn't about a seat on an airplane anymore, this was personal. At first, her attacks stayed online. She ranted on social media, claiming the court was corrupt, the airline was complicit, and that she would personally make sure Ethan never got away with his fraud. She urged her few remaining followers to contact businesses, warning them that Ethan was stealing valor to get military discounts. One day, a local store manager, confused and concerned, called Ethan. "I just got a weird complaint about you," the man said, apologetically. "I wanted to let you know we don't believe any of it. We respect our veterans." Ethan sighed. Linda was trying to ruin his reputation. It was time to document everything. He saved screenshots of her posts, recorded instances of harassment, and kept track of every baseless complaint. At first, some neighbors dismissed Linda's behavior as pathetic, but when they saw her lurking outside Ethan's house, taking pictures, their patience ran out. "Enough is enough, Linda. Leave him alone," one neighbor shouted at her one evening. But Linda hissed back, accusing them of defending a con artist. She was spiraling. Late one evening, a neighbor spotted her near Ethan's driveway. Her phone camera was glowing in the dark, aimed at his house, like she was waiting to catch him in some incriminating act. Ethan stepped outside, calm but firm. "You need to leave, Linda." She sneered. "What's wrong? Afraid the truth will come out?" Then she stormed off. But the next morning, Ethan discovered small flyers stuffed into mailboxes around the neighborhood. Each one accused him of faking his military service, rehashing the airplane incident with twisted half-truths and outrageous conspiracy theories. Enough was enough. Ethan contacted an attorney specializing in harassment. "At this point, a restraining order is justified," the attorney said. "If she escalates further, this could become a criminal matter." But before Ethan could take action, Linda pulled another stunt. Linda filmed a video outside the local VFW hall, claiming that real veterans wouldn't tolerate imposters like Ethan. The problem? Nobody inside the building knew who she was. She wasn't a veteran. She had no connections to the military. And yet, she was trying to insert herself into veteran spaces, looking for anyone to agree with her. Ethan felt a growing sense of dread. She wasn't just targeting him anymore. What if she harassed other veterans? What if she showed up at a military event just to provoke a reaction? A friend suggested hosting a quiet barbecue for local vets away for people to see Ethan for themselves and dispel the rumors. Ethan liked the idea, but deep down, he knew. Linda would show up, and she wouldn't come in peace. Linda's desperation reached new heights. She tried to call Ethan's landlord, falsely claiming he had lied about his service to get reduced rent. The landlord, confused, responded, "He owns the house outright. What are you talking about?" Another dead end. Linda was running out of ways to attack Ethan. Her social media audience had dwindled, reduced to a handful of die-hard zealots. But Ethan was exhausted. The constant surveillance, the random complaints, the smear campaign, it was starting to affect his mental health. A police officer friend gave him simple advice. If she trespasses again or leaves another threat, file a formal complaint. Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to escalate things further. But Linda left him no choice. One afternoon, he caught her at his mailbox again, stuffing another note inside. This time, he pulled out his phone and recorded her. "This is enough, Linda. You're harassing me." She shrieked in response, accusing him of harassment before running off. Minutes later, she posted an edited video, claiming Ethan had cornered her. But Ethan wasn't worried, because he had the unedited footage, and that was all he needed. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, looking at the thick stack of evidence he had compiled, screenshots of Linda's harassing messages, printed copies of her conspiracy flyers, videos of her trespassing near his home. It was time. With his lawyer's help, he officially filed for a restraining order against Linda Monroe. News of the upcoming court hearing leaked online. Linda wasted no time twisting the story, calling it a witch hunt against her. She rallied her few remaining followers, encouraging them to protest outside the courthouse. And on the morning of the hearing, a small group of them showed up. They held homemade signs that read, "Free speech with Linda. Stop fake vets from suing real patriots." The irony was lost on them. Ethan arrived, ignoring the jeers, walking in with his lawyer by his side. Inside the courtroom, Linda sat across from him, glaring. Beside her was a single attorney who already looked weary of her outlandish claims. The same judge from her failed lawsuit presided over the case, and when she saw Linda, she let out a quiet sigh of recognition. This was going to be a long day. Ethan's lawyer laid out the facts. Linda had repeatedly called businesses, trying to get Ethan blacklisted. She had trespassed near his home multiple times. She had spread defamatory flyers around the neighborhood. She had harassed him online, posting false claims for months. When Ethan's lawyer played the video of Linda sneaking around his mailbox, the judge's expression darkened. Linda tried to interrupt repeatedly, insisting she had a right to expose fraud, but this time the judge wasn't having it. "Ms. Monroe, this is no longer about free speech. This is harassment." Linda's mouth clamped shut. For the first time in weeks, she had no response. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge made her ruling. A restraining order was granted. Linda was legally prohibited from contacting Ethan in any way. She was barred from coming near his home or workplace. Any future harassment would result in criminal charges. Linda's face paled. She had lost. Again. As she stormed out of the courtroom, her few remaining followers looked at her, unsure what to believe anymore. And as Ethan walked out, a wave of relief washed over him. For the first time in months, he was finally free. The courtroom was silent as the judge sat back, arms crossed, watching the video evidence play on the screen. There was Linda Monroe, standing outside Ethan Carter's house, voice raised in fury, shouting that she would make him pay. The grainy footage might have been from a cell phone, but the message was clear as day. This wasn't just some online crusade. It was stalking. The judge turned to Linda. "Ms. Monroe, how do you explain this?" Linda straightened, arms crossed. "I was protecting the community. He's been deceiving people, and no one else was doing anything about it." The judge's expression remained unmoved. "So you believe it was your duty to follow this man, place anonymous notes in his mailbox, and urge local businesses to cut ties with him?" Linda scoffed. It was civic duty. Her attorney, visibly exhausted, placed a hand on her arm, whispering something silent plea for restraint, but Linda ignored it. Ethan's lawyer stepped forward, laying printed screenshots on the judge's desk, proof of Linda's relentless social media attacks, attempts to organize a boycott against Ethan, and smear campaigns falsely accusing him of stolen valor. The judge's expression darkened. "Ms. Monroe, free speech does not give you the right to harass or defame someone." Linda bristled, but before she could argue, the judge continued. "Let's be clear. This case is not about a seat on an airplane. It's about a months-long campaign of targeted harassment." A murmur ran through the small crowd in the gallery, neighbors, local reporters, and a few curious spectators who had followed the drama. Linda's attorney made a last-ditch effort, shifting uncomfortably. "Your Honor, my client only sought the truth. Surely that is not a crime." The judge turned to him. "Do you have any evidence to justify her actions? Any proof that Mr. Carter deceived anyone?" The lawyer hesitated, then shook his head. That was the final blow. The judge's ruling was swift and absolute. A permanent restraining order was granted against Linda Monroe. She was forbidden from contacting Ethan in any way, directly or indirectly. She was barred from coming near his home or workplace. Any violation would result in immediate legal consequences, possibly criminal charges. Linda's face twisted in shock. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to scream, but the reality was finally sinking in. This wasn't just another public spectacle. She had pushed too far. And now, there were real consequences. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but no one sympathized. She had brought this on herself. With one last glare at Ethan, she stormed out of the courtroom, phone gripped tightly in her hand, her few remaining followers hesitating before trailing after her. Some looked uncertain, as if realizing they'd been following the wrong person all along. Ethan exhaled slowly, the weight of months of harassment finally lifting. His lawyer shook his hand, offering a satisfied nod. "It's over." Outside the courthouse, a few reporters lingered, hoping for a final statement. Ethan shook his head politely, offering a simple, no comment. He didn't want to fuel the drama any further. He just wanted his life back, and that's exactly what he got. In the following weeks, Linda Monroe vanished from the public eye. Her once active social media accounts fell silent. Some said she had moved away to avoid the humiliation. Others heard she had simply gone offline, licking her wounds. Whatever the case, Ethan didn't care. For the first time in a long time, his name was clear, his peace restored. The nightmare was finally over. It had all started over a single first-class seat. A moment of entitlement had spiraled into a full-blown vendetta. But, in the end, Linda Monroe's obsession had destroyed only one person herself. And Ethan. He had something she never did, the truth on his side. Now, finally, he could move forward and never look back.